So we've got Gran Canaria down here, which I set off from yesterday, the Azores up here where I'm going, and that takes me past, give or take, past Madeira in the middle. And the weather setting off, this is the forecast. Now, this is what it's like. You know, fine, it's kind of, it was predicting about 16 knots, but it's actually blowing more like 20, 25. And then tomorrow, this comes through, and just not sure whether I should just carry on and just battle through it and heave to if it gets bad, or cut back and just take a bit of shelter from the island for 24 hours and then carry on afterwards slightly higher up. Particularly around here next to the island, you'll get a funnel effect, an acceleration zone, and if that's predicting 30 knots, then stick on another 10 because it's an acceleration zone. Anyway, I'll make a decision tonight on that, I think. So, one day in now. Last night, got a reasonable amount of sleep, to be honest, even though the boat was slamming quite a lot. Lucky enough to have an aft cabin, so didn't hear much of it. Nothing on the AIS, so I felt like I could sleep more than 20 minutes at a time. Still not laying Madeira. Not bad, but kind of pinching really. I could go faster if I bore off slightly, but I figure that keeping about 5 knots and a bit closer to the wind is better. Hopefully I'll get close to Madeira to shelter behind it when this blow comes through tomorrow. So it's not quite what I thought it would be, being out offshore single-handed. Kind of felt like it would be this overwhelming sense of freedom and bliss being out there on your own. But I suppose most of the offshore passages I've done beforehand have been either reaching or running downwind. I've never done anything, I haven't really done anything, to be honest, offshore upwind. I mean, there was never really a time I need to do that. And now going north from the Canaries, that's what you have to do, and it's just more hard work than anything else. I mean, we're only one day in, so maybe things will change, or maybe it's just upwind is just miserable. It's fine for a bit, but when you've been doing it for 36 hours, it's just one tack just slamming away. It's just a bit. Anyway, maybe it'll get better. So I decided to skip Madeira. It was just a bit too much hard work, just bashing up, and I couldn't point high enough to do it in one tack, which means I was going to have to do an 8-hour tack back to the island before this bad weather came in. So I just decided to carry on through the bad weather. The forecast isn't saying gale, but it doesn't even really intensify till later this afternoon or this evening, and we're already blowing 34 knots true with gusts. Getting occasionally quite a lot of water over the decks. But I'm kind of hoping it's just in a bit of an acceleration zone off the island. We're quite far off the island, but I'm thinking that maybe it's from that, and hopefully as I reach away from the island it might not intensify, or might just stay the same. If it does stay the same, it's not going to be too bad. So I didn't do much filming yesterday because I was trying to decide whether to go up to Madeira, try and get up there, or just go straight to the Azores and go through the slightly stronger weather. So that's what I did, and then I got underneath Madeira and past the other side, and quickly it was blowing 35, 36. I was like, okay, I'll press on, and that wasn't too bad. And then the waves started to build, and then by mid-afternoon it was blowing near 40. And although the actual wave height wasn't huge, the wind waves were then breaking. But it wasn't too bad because I was able to hand steer at that point and able to round up into the waves. Then it got to about sundown, and it was getting pretty bad. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I'll heave 2 for the night because I can't see these waves that I'm going to be wanting to steer up into. So I'd already heavily reefed the main anyway, so I thought I'd reef it some more. Anyway, and trying to furl it single-handed, I couldn't stop it flogging it, and it only flogged for about 30 seconds and ripped. Somehow I managed to actually furl the main into the mast because I've got in-mast furling, so I furled it into the mast, and then I thought, well, the only thing to do, I can't heave 2 now, so the only thing I can do is put the engine on and try and plod slowly at about 60, 50 into the waves so it bashed through anything. So I started to do that with a little bit of staysail, and it was working, but every 2 minutes a big breaking wave would bash the bow and bring it off, which wasn't great, but I was kind of like, well, it's the only option I've got, really. Anyway, after about 2 hours of that, the engine just decided to cut out, and it just stopped. Tried to restart it, but then within 30 seconds the boat was beam on to the breaking seas, which at this point I couldn't even see. So then I just took the decision that I've got to deploy this drogue like now. So I went outside, turned the boat downwind, and deployed it for the first time. Deployed the drogue that I thought I'd never actually have to deploy in my entire lifetime, because it's just one of those things that sits in the locker and never really gets used. Anyway, so that's what I did. Straight away, the boat was really calm. It just kind of took on a totally different thing, I suppose, like going heave 2.
So these are the conditions in the morning the following day, where they weren't nearly as serious as the night before when I deployed the drogue, but I was still getting the occasional breaking wave into the cockpit. So I felt like it was probably best to leave it out and give myself time to fix the engine and do a few of the bits, and leave it for the following day.
Yikes! This is a big one. So here's a funny one. Just after I put the drogue out last night, need to get back, so I jumped out of bed after this big wave crashed over the stern, and you felt the boat jerk forward. And so I jumped out of bed and then looked out one of the windows I have in my aft cabin here, and then peered through there, and all I could see was bubbles underwater. So the entire cockpit around here was full of water, like a huge jacuzzi. And at that point I was thinking, gosh, if a wave can get right over the top like that and fill up the entire cockpit, which is a big cockpit, then it probably was the right decision. But you could feel it surge forward, and then you could feel the drogue gently kind of halt you and slow you down. I think it's a testament to how good this drogue is when you can knock up a Spanish omelette salad whilst it's blowing a gale outside and there's waves crashing around you. Well, yeah, pretty quickly. Then you'll see here how I've got chain protection on the first bit of the bridle, and then the actual chain plates stick out of the hull quite a lot, so there's virtually no chafe. Right, so now for the moment I've been dreading, which is to get the drogue back in again. I've read various different ways of doing this, but just single-handed, the earliest time I heard of someone doing it was a couple of hours. Anyway, so I've been on the drogue for about a day and a night now. Probably yesterday evening would have been a good time to get it in, but still there was blowing maybe force 5 and there were waves, and I just don't think there was going to be any chance of me actually doing it, so I waited till this morning so it's abated a bit. So I've got, first and foremost, electric winch, which I use for single handling anyway, and I think that's going to help. My climbing helmet, because there's still waves around and it's kind of a confused sea with less wind, so it's jolting all over the place, and I kind of think not whacking your head while spending 2 hours in the cockpit pulling ropes is a good idea. Then I've got various climbing bits and bobs. My Prusik knot, a spare sling, some carabiners. So it's probably going to take me a lot longer than I'd hoped to, because I could do with getting underway really. I think the wind's going to drop quite a lot today, and I could do with just chasing that and actually getting going. And I think this is probably the biggest thing going through my head when I stood at night with breakers around me, thinking, holding the chain and the drogue ready to go, should I deploy this? It could be a while since I can get this back in. And I wonder how many people wait too long to deploy it and maybe get a bad knockdown wishing they'd deployed it earlier. Anyway, it is what it is. After a day and a night on it, I'm really glad, because I just felt really safe throughout it. Able to eat 2 good meals yesterday and sleep loads last night, so all in all I'm very glad. Anyway, let's see how I get on. I'm doing the first bit, which is recovering one of the leaders, so then hopefully I can get the main recovering one of the bridles so I can get it around a winch. So what I'm doing is attaching the Prusik to one of the bridles, winching it in on here, and then attaching another one. So I've actually got one attached here and one standing by over there, and I winch it in metre by metre until I get to the main bit, or enough of the bridle then to put it round the actual winch. Right, so that took about half an hour just to get the bridle in with some Prusiks. I've now got the main first leader in. My issue is going to be this is going to run out of batteries, and then I will be doing it by hand. I've seen on morganscloud.com that one of the chaps there has a handheld electric winch with 2 lithium batteries, and he can be charging one while the other's being used. So the battery has run out on the electric winch, and now I'm by hand, but in fact, apart from being a lot more hard work, I actually think it's quicker, because you can wait for it to go slack with a wave and then quickly winch in. Yeah, check me out. Once there's a wave, it goes slack enough to be going pretty quick on the winch. Faster than the electric winch actually. Whereas by hand you can stop and start very quickly and go when it gets slack. And presumably anyone wanting to get a series drogue in is going to have some remnants of some waves and swell when they do get it in to use this technique. Okay, we're on the last leader now. What I would say is, don't be disheartened if the first, getting the bridle and the first large leader is slow and difficult, because once you get onto the second 2, it all starts speeding up rather quickly. So should be on for about an hour and a half retrieval, which is pretty good I think for the first go. I could probably get it down to an hour if I had to go again. Woo! Got it in. All in. 5 knots for the moment. I just want to try and get back up on course because I dropped around about 40 miles south under the Drogue, which wasn't too much to be honest. You know, it's less than two knots with the Drogue, about 1.5. And yeah, so I want to make that back up really and get onto course so that when some wind comes in tomorrow evening or Saturday that I get to use that and get a beam reach, because going upwind with just head sails is not ideal really. So if I can get onto a beam reach course then that would be perfect. Oh, and I fixed the engine because it's running now. So I was fairly sure it wasn't the fuel. And then I found that the lift pump had a leak on it. Didn't have a spare one, and it was too difficult to change anyway, really. So I used some amalgamating tape and basically bandaged it up and stopped any air from getting in. How to bleed a diesel engine. And I do it about once a year, and it's a bit like your tax return. You forget each year how to do it. And it's amazing how the first 3 days of this passage were just pretty god awful, particularly the Tuesday when I had to deploy the Drogue, and then now it's just lovely and you know, the sun is out, wind is light, could do with a bit more but it's nice. And amazing how quickly you forget about the bad times when it's nice. And the Drogue, trusty Drogue, is back in its bag, all stowed in exactly the same place it was before I used it, all rigged, all lines going back and rigged ready to roll again. But like most people that buy one of these big series Drogues, they hope they'll never have to use it in their life. And perhaps I won't have to use it again. But I am glad that if I do have to use it again, it's going to be an easy choice to do it, because I know that it'll work and I know that I can get it back in again. Okay, and here we have a spare main. Unfortunately, this boat came with 2 mains when I bought it. Here she blows. All right. Okay, why have I got a fat fender in the water with a mooring line attached to it? Because I figured that whilst I was prancing around on deck for an hour, if I fell in, the boat was only going about 1 knot. So I figured if I could swim to the rope and clip onto it, I would stand a chance of getting back on board.
I made a reasonable amount of progress just under head sails without any main for a day, and typically the wind drops enough for me to get the old rip main down and the new main up, and look what happens. The wind dies and we're barely making any progress at all. And then that goes eventually to absolutely 0 wind, and we're basically sat on a mill pond. But it was a welcome break, and took that time to make some decent food, get some sleep, do a bit of maintenance, have a swim, and just enjoy being at sea really, and wait for the wind to fill in, well, hopefully a couple of days.
Boat was moving about half a knot. Sudden panic when it moved away by about 2 centimeters. I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna be left! 0 wind. Not even a whisker. Other side, might spot a whale. A good friend of ours, a chap called Murray from Oxford, who actually gave me the confidence to do this passage on my own, because he said that on his passage from Madeira to the Azores, a whale joined him on the first day and went the entire way to the Azores with him, which should be awesome. Anyway, I'm doing the cardinal sin of motoring a little bit, not full tilt, just about 3 knots, because I have figured that since I now have a mainsail to repair, or the primary mainsail to repair, and a few other repairs, like the Windex has just decided to blow away with those conditions the other day, and also I've got to test when I get there. They're quarantining people because of coronavirus, so I'm going to have to do a test and sit and wait for the results before I can actually go on land, so maybe there's another reason to get there. So I just thought I'd do a quick one on what I'm using for weather and getting weather forecasts while offshore, and I use PredictWind with the Iridium Go to download the data from the satellites rather than a sat phone. I'll just spin around, kind of show you where we're at on this one. So Iridium Go is here. That costs, I don't know, anywhere between £30 and £70 a month, to include enough data so you can download as much weather forecast as you want and send emails and so on. And then PredictWind is nice because it's free when you're not offshore, and you only pay for it, and you'll need a subscription to use it with a sat phone when you are offshore, so I only end up subscribing to that about 3 months of the year. Anyway, it works for me, and the download rate isn't super fast, but the GRIB files on PredictWind are so small that it just doesn't matter. Madeira down here, we came up here, got stuck in that horrible conditions and set the drogue out around here, drifted down here, and we're now approximately halfway between Madeira and the Azores. And this band is coming in here, so we've had no wind at all for the last couple of days, and then what we're seeing now is this first part of it filling in. So by 8 o'clock this evening we should be getting about 15 knots of wind, which should allow us to kind of shy reach, and then by tomorrow at 6 AM it should be almost a beam reach to the Azores. The other thing I might add is I usually download GFS and ECMF, the European model, and I always think, well, if those two models are saying the same thing, then your forecast is going to be pretty damn accurate, and they are. So this is ECMF over the next couple of days, and if we do the same on GFS is giving a little less wind at the moment. That fills in and gives pretty much exactly the same forecast, so I'm fairly happy that that's going to be accurate. I say that it was down here when we got done, you know, it was talking about 25 knots and we had 40 plus knots, so, but that was, I believe, more of an acceleration effect compounded by the very long fetch from Finisterre, where the wind was coming from, and Portugal, that had just left this pocket of just horrendous conditions which I got stuck in, which perhaps the model is not complex enough to be able to forecast for. Possibly the best boat invention, or not even a boat invention, it's not even for boats, is a handheld blender. Just the best thing ever. Check it out. Okay, you don't even need to chop the onion this much if you don't want to. You can cook anything in here. You can just stick in massive lumps. Anyway, check it out. Oh yes. Tiny bit of wind filling back in again. Actually quite happy with this main. This is the spare main, the lightweight main, non-battened, not as thick, but it keeps a reasonably good shape actually. So reasonably happy with it. Well, after 3 days of pretty much no wind, 2 days of actually having the new mainsail up, some wind has kind of come back and we do appear to be sailing. Although not really in the right direction, but this is sailing after all, and when do we actually get to go exactly in the right direction? Excuse me. So wind filled in yesterday evening, and according to the forecast should have been able to start sailing, so anyway I did, and I'll show you roughly what's going on here. We're down here, going up here, and beating up against the wind to begin with, and then slowly as the night came on, becoming more on the beam. But I was just hard on the wind, and it just wouldn't point. Well, it would point, but we wouldn't be going in the right direction. You can see here. So we were going along here, put the sails out, and then started to point down here, pointing right down towards flipping South America. Anyway, we're now sailing. Six through the water, 5.5 over ground. Sun is coming up over there. 78 miles in the last 12 hours since I got the sails out properly at 8 o'clock this morning, which is pretty good. Pretty good for an old heavyweight boat sailing upwind, particularly sailing upwind. I think that's pretty good going, really. Occasionally getting some water over the deck and highlighting where I need to seal a few windows. Last night at sea, because we'll probably get there today, but I really wanted to try and get over the last 24 hours, from 8 AM yesterday, I really wanted to try and get 150 miles done. That's a bit of a challenge. In the last 23 hours and 6 minutes, we've done 144 miles. So in the next 55 minutes, we need to scrape up 6 nautical miles. And we're doing about 5.2. Really don't need to put any more main out, but need to step it up. Put more of the main out, and I'm now getting 6.7. It's going to be close. No, I've got 42 minutes and only 2.5 miles to go for my 150 target, and the flipping wind has just stopped. So I've kind of got a racing background rather than a cruising background. So this is where a bit of fine tuning is going to come in. Pretty close. 9 minutes to make up 1.2 miles. Oh god. Shit. I just cut up this mango in to celebrate when I get my 150 upwind miles. Oh no, and that's it! One day! Oh no! Exactly 24 hours, and look, the wind's just come back up. We're doing nearly 7 knots again with only 0.4 of a mile to do it. I can't believe it! So should have been out here trimming sails rather than faffing around down there.
Anyway, I mustn't complain because the last day sailing into the island was absolutely fantastic and a really great finish to my first offshore single-handed passage. The sea state was flat, the winds were perfect, which slowly died off to about 5 or 10 knots as the sun went down, and I was able to gently reach into the harbour at Ponta Delgada.